Howdy, folks. It's your friend Max Mogren reporting live for you for Wake Up News. This is Wake Up Wyoming for Monday, the 25th of September, 2017. Thank you so much for tuning in. We got a big show today covering the news. Some good news out there. I just got a message from Aaron at Storm Clouds Gathering. This is the first we've heard from him in the wake of Hurricane Maria. He's on the island of Dominica in the Caribbean, which suffered arguably worse destruction than Puerto Rico. USA Today just put out some shocking before and after satellite photos of Dominica in the wake of Hurricane Maria. Aaron's doing okay. They survived, thank God, but obviously their project there has taken a big hit. So check out the Storm Clouds Gathering page on Facebook for more info from them. And his new project is really cool. It's paradigm for the next generation.com. Paradigm for the next generation. Aaron, the whole crew at Storm Clouds Gathering, really leading the charge when it comes to putting their money where their mouth is, building this off-grid permaculture farm on the island of Dominica. Unfortunately, Hurricane Maria took out that whole island. So show your support for Dominica any way you can. Same with Puerto Rico. The power's still out in Puerto Rico. They've upped the death toll on Dominica to 27 in the wake of Hurricane Maria. So really serious situation there. Most of the trees on that island are gone. Of course, here on Wake Up Wyoming, we ask the big questions. Why are hurricanes, unprecedented, massive hurricanes, causing crazy destruction in places like Houston, Florida, Puerto Rico, and Dominica when the capability exists to weaken and steer hurricanes? It has for a long time. Thank you so much for tuning in. James Doc Sheeran asking you there. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Karen J. Bowden, what's up? Shannon Wendricks, thanks for tuning in. And I want to give a special, super huge thank you to Jill from Montana, who gave a very generous donation to support my work. Arguably, well, more support in the financial sense for my work than I've experienced in a very, very, very long time. So Jill, thank you so much. She was actually trying to donate on Patreon, and they wouldn't let her do it for some reason or whatever. It wouldn't work. She said her phone or computer would freeze up every time she was trying to donate on Patreon. So she made a donation on PayPal, and I just want to say thank you to Jill. So far, I haven't had any supporters show up on Patreon. So check it out if you want to. But big thanks to Jill. Again, Storm Clouds Gathering. We heard from Aaron at Storm Clouds Gathering. They're on the island of Dominica, and they're okay. But serious devastation there. So check out Paradigm for the Next Generation if you want to support their work. We got a big show today. We're going to talk about the dotard Trump. If you're not familiar with dotard, it's kind of a cool word that Kim Jong-un actually brought to the attention of the American masses. It's an old person who has become weak and senile. Unfortunately, Trump, very powerful. Obviously not the most powerful person in the U.S. He's more of a puppet dictator, if you will. But, whatever. The whole NFL take a knee thing, we're going to get into that. The new tax plan, we're going to get into that. If you want to follow along or you're just tired of hearing my voice but want the scoop on it, check out wakeupnews.net. I got all the links for today's stories on there. Let's get right into it. We're kind of doing it backwards. In my last headline there, the good news, a plastic-eating fungus was found in a garbage dump in Pakistan. The Independent reporting. Scientists believe they may have discovered one solution to the planet's growing level of plastic waste in the form of a plastic-eating fungus. Okay, this is new news. This is kind of an exciting development. Researchers who set out to find a naturally occurring means of degrading waste plastic safely extracted samples from a rubbish dump outside Islamabad in Pakistan and found a soil fungus that was feeding on plastic. That's cool because up until this point in history, I'm pretty sure there's nothing out there that eats plastic. A few weeks ago, we reported here on Wake Up Wyoming that plastic particles are found in most of the tap water all over the world. 83% of samples harboring plastic, and the U.S. fared the worst with a whopping contamination rate of 94%. Okay, microscopic plastic particles in the water supply, in the tap water. This wasn't just in sketchy locations like Flint, Michigan either. They found plastic fibers in the tap water coming from places like the buildings of Congress, the US EPA, and Trump Tower in New York City. So plastic, a big problem. Let's all try to cut down on our plastic waste any way we can. Thank you all for tuning in. Looks like we've got it going on here. Dennis Paul Siebold, thank you so much for tuning in. Michael Shane Kirkpatrick, what's up? James Doc Sheeran, I'm sorry your broadcast is freezing up. It seems like it's working for everybody else, so maybe try to close it down and reopen it. Next headline, okay, this is disturbing. The water in Flint. Okay, there's a new study. Previous studies have said that, the water in Flint, not a really big deal, but it obviously is a huge deal. All over the U.S., there's not just plastic in the tap water, but there's all sorts of toxic crap. And the University of Kansas, a study released Wednesday found that the lead-contaminated water in Flint, Michigan caused lower fertility rates and higher infant death rates. They found the fertility rates in Flint decreased by 12% and fetal death rates increased by 58%. Okay, a lot of factors in Flint, obviously a very, economically repressed city, but the water situation there is ridiculous. It's absurd that the U.S. government has got money to go blow up places like Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, all over the world, but it can't even fix bad pipes, bad water supplies here in the U.S. It's sad. This represents a couple hundred fewer children that otherwise would have been born. Skulski of the Michigan Department of Health and of the University of Kansas said, one of the researchers. The study's findings contradict a July 2015 study by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, which concluded that there was no evidence that indicates the water in Flint caused higher fetal death rates. Although American pharmacists in the early 20th century, this is an interesting factoid, they gave lead pills to women who wanted to have abortions back in the early 20th century. The science about the effects of lead poisoning on fertility and infant death rates isn't conclusive, according to the University of Kansas. Okay, so our heart goes out to all the people of Flint dealing with that situation, right? But they're not alone. There's bad tap water all over the United States. It's too bad that we can't do anything about that, apparently. Next headline we got today. Governments will close down Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies if they get too big, warns who? Jamie Dimon. Okay, this is pretty funny. JP Morgan Chase Chief Executive Jamie Dimon has laid into Bitcoin and digital currencies once again, warning that governments will shut them down if they grow too large. Right now, these crypto things are kind of a novelty. People think they're kind of neat. But the bigger they get, the more governments are going to close them down, Dimon said during an interview with CNBC TV 18 in New Delhi, India on Friday. Dimon is concerned that Bitcoin, Ethereum, and various ICOs are proliferating into cryptocurrencies everywhere. It's creating something out of nothing, and that to me is worth nothing, said Dimon. It will end badly. Okay, central banks create something out of nothing. Cryptocurrencies, really not that much different than fiat currencies, except that they're not centrally controlled, right? But Jamie Dimon says they're worthless. Dimon warned the governments will eventually crack down on cryptocurrencies and attempt to control it by threatening anyone who buys or sells Bitcoin with imprisonment, which would force digital currencies into becoming a black market. These are the latest comments from Dimon attacking Bitcoin. Earlier this month, he called cryptocurrencies a fraud. His comments, along with several prominent hedge fund investors, came before a sharp sell-off in Bitcoin. The price of one Bitcoin fell from around $4,300 to a low of $2,900 in the days after his comments. Of course, this article from CNBC not taking into consideration the fact that the government of China directly passed laws banning the sale of Bitcoin in China. Rather big economy, China, arguably bigger than the U.S. Bitcoin has since recovered to around $3,600 according to CoinDesk data. Despite the volatility, Bitcoin's value has risen 264% this year. Okay, I'm not sure what to make of cryptocurrency still. It's a great way to make some money if you're willing to take the risk and speculate in the markets, but huge swings. You know, if you're going to play with cryptos, keep a close eye on it. Keep a close eye on it. People are chiming in here. People are saying it's the same. Shannon Wendricks, a fan of cryptos. Crypto's more than neat. I agree. And Shannon chiming in, that was only banning new initial coin offerings in China. I think they shut down the exchanges, though, too. Now the Japanese exchanges are the largest in the world, but I could be wrong on that. So, yeah, it's interesting. Jamie Dimon going after cryptocurrencies, saying that they're fraudulent, saying that the cryptocurrency miners, the cryptocurrency creators are making something out of nothing. Of course, that's what fiat currencies are. The U.S. dollar, since the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1971, has been backed by nothing except people's faith in the Federal Reserve Bank and the U.S. government. Of course, a lot of gun barrel diplomacy keeping the petrodollar system alive since then. It's going to be interesting to see what happens now that the petro yuan has debuted. Venezuela, one of the largest oil producers in the world, vowing to go off the dollar completely. We'll see what happens there. But, you know, important to keep an eye on the markets and the cryptocurrency markets for that matter. This phone is acting up on me. Curious to see some more comments here. Thank you all for chiming in. We got 97 viewers. Looking at Syria, okay, the U.S. and Israel on the offensive in Syria. It sounds like they don't really have a chance of winning the war in Syria, but what it looks like they're doing, Israel was bombing some locations right near the airport in Damascus. We don't know exactly what they bombed. And the U.S. taking oil fields, okay, doing these kind of surgical strikes in and grabbing oil fields, arguably to use as bartering chips when they do eventually pull out of Syria. And according to Zero Hedge today, Russia warns the U.S. in an unprecedented secret face-to-face meeting over Syria. But what's the end game? The moment the first Russian jet landed in Syria at the invitation of the Assad government in 2015, Putin placed himself in the driver's seat concerning the international proxy war. Okay, it's important to note, the Syrian government has welcomed the support of Russia. The United States, you can look at things going all the way back to 2012, documenting, proving that the U.S. funded, supports, and trained ISIS, okay? They always say they're attacking ISIS in Syria, but really, Uncle Sam is attacking the Syrian government in Syria. Though U.S. relations with Russia have become more belligerent and intense, partly as a result of that intervention, it meant that Russia would set the terms of how the war would ultimately wind down. Russia's diplomatic and strategic victory in the Middle East was made clear this week as news broke of secret and unprecedented U.S.-Russian face-to-face talks on Syria. The Russians reportedly issued a stern warning to the U.S. military, saying that it will respond in force should the Syrian army or Russian assets come under fire by U.S. proxies. U.S. proxies like ISIS, right? The AP reports the senior military officials from both countries met in an undisclosed location to discuss spheres of operation in Syria and how to avoid the potential for a direct clash of forces. Tensions have escalated in the past 2 weeks as the Syrian army, in tandem with Russian special forces, are now set to fully liberate Deir ez-Zor city, while at the same time the U.S.-backed SDF, an Arab Kurdish coalition, the Syrian Democratic Forces, pretty funny name for a bunch of people that aren't even Syrians. They call it, the U.S. coalition, the SDF, are advancing on the other side of the Euphrates. As was explained before, the U.S. is not fundamentally motivated in its race for the province by a defeat of ISIS terrorism, but in truth to control the eastern province's oil fields. Whatever oil fields the SDF, that's the U.S.-supported Syrian Democratic Forces, can gain control of in the wake of the ISIS's retreat will then be used as powerful bargaining leverage in negotiating a post-ISIS Syria. Okay, so that's what's going on in Syria. Lots of crazy things all over the world in the scheme of international relations. Again, we see all this news about North Korea. We really don't have to worry about Kim Jong-un or the North Koreans nuking the United States. That's classic fear mongering. It's been going on, it's been going on for a long time. One guy, one tin pot dictatorship that might have a couple nukes is no threat. Certainly not anywhere on par with the Russians during the Cold War, where they had 10,000 nukes pointed at the U.S. But we're, in the paper every day, fear, fear, fear. And Kim Jong-un, kind of a witty dude, calling Trump a dotard. Of course, Trump labeling him the rocket man. It's just smoke and mirrors, my friends. Let's not get caught up on that too much. Onward to the NFL situation. Okay, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. It's pretty cool, I have to say, to see all these athletes standing up. I'm not a sports fan. I think sports are bread and circuses. I think it's one of the most divisive and distracting things in the country. But at least these millionaire athletes are doing something to stand up to, the Trumps of the world, the police state. Of course, it's kind of a distraction in another sense when it gums up the entire news cycle. And, Trump's comments on the thing, pretty shocking. Who would have thunk that the president of the United States would be going on national TV and saying stuff like this? It's absolutely offensive, and I can't stress it enough. Trump is not the hero that some people thought he was when he got elected. He's in there to divide us. A nation divided cannot stand. Trump, the most divisive, villainous character to enter the U.S. political scene in a very long time, getting everybody all riled up. A good example of that, just yesterday, there was a big event at UC Berkeley. Luke Radkowski of We Are Change was live streaming that whole event. And as I was helping my little brother paint his house, see, I still got some paint on my arm. As I was helping my little brother paint his house yesterday, I was watching this whole live stream that Luke was putting out. Shocking to see people on both sides, left and right. It was that Milo guy who's I don't know what his deal is, but this Milo guy was coming to UC Berkeley for a so-called free speech event, and there was a big backlash from kind of Antifa type people. Luckily it didn't turn violent, but a lot of shouting on both sides, a lot of taunting, really the kind of divided and conquered protest that showcases how the Trump administration, how this agenda, this divisive agenda, is working against people, right? People on both sides of that conflict yesterday at UC Berkeley probably have a lot more in common with one another than they do with the global elites, with guys like Donald Trump. And interesting to see people, it was a free speech rally, to see people at Berkeley, which was arguably, was one of, during the Vietnam War, during the Civil Rights Movement, it was one of the hotbeds of the free speech movement, to see people, basically saying that these right-wing guys like Milo don't have a right to speak there. They're kind of going against the basic fundamental rights that we all need. You don't have free speech, you got nothing. And even in the world today, with all the covert censorship we see, with the government declaring free speech zones, at this event yesterday, you couldn't even go into the protest area. You couldn't even go into the Milo event if you had a backpack on or a bottle of water for security reasons. But yeah, the divisiveness of Trump, can't stress it enough. And as this whole national anthem thing's going on, what am I saying here? The real big news out of the Trump administration is that this week they're gonna roll out their plan for these big tax breaks. Kate Catanella chiming in, the masses are using Milo as an excuse to destroy the First Amendment. I have listened to him. Milo is a moderate conservative. Don't always agree with him, but he does make valid points on some issues. Kate, that's a really good point. Thanks for chiming in there. That was if you want to check out what was going on in Berkeley yesterday, you might not want to watch the entire 3 hours, but check out We Are Change's live stream. And yeah, it's strange to see people who are on the left protesting against free speech. It was really disturbing to see. And instead of going after the real culprits, kind of turning in on ourselves, I think we all need to be aware that that's part of what the Trump administration is all about, is dividing people based on race, dividing people based on class, dividing people based on sex. The Trump versus Hillary thing, the Million Woman March, great example of that. A lot of people turned up at that march, but if it was all about men versus women, it's not really humans versus the system, or the global elite, the globalist warmongering banksters versus everybody else. Karen J. Bowden chiming in. Milo is a radical white supremacist who defends pedophiles and has been accused of pedophilia himself. I've listened to him speak defending NAMBLA, that's the Man Boy Love Association, and find him disgusting. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate both your comments there. Again, I don't know too much about Milo, but it's good to see some discussion, some debate there. And I guess I have heard some about the pedophile thing with Milo. Lord knows pedophilia is rampant within the halls of power. Very disturbing situation. So great to see some discussion in the comments there. But interestingly, Trump's war with the NFL threatens to overshadow the rollout of his tax plan. This is coming from Bloomberg. The big thing Wall Street and corporate America really want from President Donald Trump is a tax cut. And on the week that his plan is being revealed, Trump instead is asking Americans to choose sides between kneeling football players and the U.S. flag. Okay, real good point. Bloomberg also chiming in with a couple headlines today. Trump says he wants 15% corporate tax rate, despite a plan calling for 20%. And the Trump plan, as expected, is cutting taxes for the rich much more disproportionately than taxes for the rest of us. Republican tax negotiators are targeting a corporate tax rate of 20%, according to two people familiar with the matter. But there's at least one potential obstacle, President Donald Trump. We'll see what happens, but I hope it's going to be 15%. Trump told reporters Sunday as he prepared to return to Washington after a weekend in New Jersey, probably doing a little golfing there. The corporate tax rate is 35% currently. Trump wants it at 15%. The new tax plan going for 20%. That's a big cut. Big cut. Meanwhile, the group of administration officials and congressional readers that's planning the framework for tax legislation is also expected to recommend cutting the top individual tax rate, so for individual taxpayers, to 35%, down from almost 40%. That's a huge cut too, a 5% tax break for the wealthiest Americans. The emerging framework includes a proposal to cut the corporate tax rate to 20% from 35%, a costly move in revenue terms that Trump and Republicans say is necessary to create job growth. But its provisions for individual taxes may hit closer to home for the majority of Americans. Three tax lobbyists familiar with those changes said they include cutting the top individual tax rate to 35% and creating a 25% rate for certain pass-through business owners. Okay, what's the pass-through business owners? Both changes from the current top rate of 39.6%. Such changes would cut taxes substantially for the top 1% of earners, said Kyle Palmer-Lew, an expert with the Tax Foundation, a right-leaning Washington policy group. An analysis by Washington's Tax Policy Center last year found that half of the business income earned by all pass-through businesses, such as partnerships and LLCs, goes to those making $693,000 or more annually, placing them well within the top 1% of taxpayers by income. Okay, so as expected, I got some nice charts there, laying it all out. Check that out on wakeupnews.net. But not surprisingly, these Trump tax cuts disproportionately benefiting the wealthiest people. According to this plan, if you make $1.8 million annually under the Trump tax reduction plan, you're going to save about $200,000. Whereas if you make about $15,600 annually, that's the lowest 20% of Americans fall into that income bracket, your savings is going to be a whopping $250. Okay, so a huge disproportionate situation there. For the second 20%, Americans making up to $32,000 annually, their tax savings under this proposed plan is $1,150 annually. So not, you know, it would help a little, but not compared to, you know, if the I'm not really big on taxation. I don't think the government should be collecting so much tax, and they certainly know how to waste it. But at the same time, if people who are making upwards of $1.5 million annually are going to have an extra 190,000 take-home income at the end of the year, while people who are only making 15,000 annually are going to save a whopping $250, that's not fair. Not fair at all. So yeah, the Trump thing, the whole NFL take a knee, distract, divide, and conquer scenario, kind of a smokescreen for this tax plan coming down the pipe. We'll see what it actually says. I think they're going to talk about it on Wednesday. But yeah. Kate Catanella chiming in again. Purely distraction on what is really important, such as being poisoned by chemtrails, military bomb fallout worldwide, oil pipeline and fracking, that is going to kill us all. What people say ideologically is the least threat. Okay. Lots of good comments in here. Thank you. Karen J. Bowden chiming in on the tax situation. Continuing the upward transfer of wealth seems to be the main interest of our politicians. It certainly does, doesn't it? And on the same vein as Kate there, you know, when people, you know, we always talk about, at least we talk about it here on my show, the mainstream doesn't touch it, but, you know, the depopulation agenda, poison food, poison water, places like Flint, all over the country, poisoned air with the chemtrail agenda. But the greatest cause of sickness and death, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people agree with me, I think the medical science agrees with me, is stress. Just good old-fashioned stress. Cortisol, the stress hormone, shuts down your immune system, makes you more susceptible to things like cancer. You know, you have difficulty sleeping when you're stressed out. And the greatest source of stress for a lot of Americans is the economic system, economic oppression that we see in, you know, for example, in this new tax plan, where the people that, you know, you can barely survive in this country on $15,000 annually. Yet 20% of Americans, that's how much money they make. And yeah, it's heartbreaking to see. Miguel Sanchez saying, pay attention to everyone. These are the real issues, right? That's what we try to get into here. You know, I try to study the mainstream and convey it to all of you in a, you know, as optimistic a sense as possible, given the whole circumstances. But I agree completely. The mainstream is a smokescreen from the real issues. So we try to take the fake news and interject some real news, make it palatable for everybody, and try to have some fun with it. As fun as it is. Speaking of the system, Zero Hedge, funny little article today. The Russian collusion thing, if you haven't followed this, you know, the Russia meddling thing is another great example of the mainstream media just distracting us all. Yesterday's Star Tribune in the Twin Cities, the Russia hack targeted Minnesota, front page headline. Of course, if you don't just read the headline, you actually read the article, you find out that the Russians didn't do anything to Minnesota. Last year, the federal government told the Associated Press that hackers thought to be Russian agents. You know, there's no confirmation there. Hackers thought to be Russian agents had targeted more than 20 states before the 2016 elections. Friday, Department of Homeland Security officials called election officials in 21 states and confirmed that there was the first official confirmation of the affected states. This is a quote from Simon, what's his name? Sorry, I'm jumping around the article here a little. Well, state of Minnesota election official. This afternoon, I received a phone call from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security informing me of its determination that Minnesota was among 21 states targeted. What wrote Simon, who has overseen a number of security updates to Minnesota's election systems. Department of Homeland Security confirmed to my office that there was no breach and no attempt to breach Minnesota's election system. So there we go. The guy who runs the Minnesota elections here is saying the Department of Homeland Security contacted him and told them that there was no breach and no attempt to breach Minnesota's election system. So this entire headline isn't true. There was no attempt to breach Minnesota's election system. But the headline, Russia did it. Russia put Trump in the White House. It's ridiculous. But on the topic of the Russia meddling, Facebook got some guff about this. This one simple chart proves that Facebook thinks you're a moron, coming from Zero Hedge. Last week, we jokingly wrote about a Facebook press release that was apparently an honest effort by the social media giant intended to summarize Russian efforts to undermine the 2016 election using the Facebook social media platform. That said, at least to us, it seemed as though Facebook unwittingly proved what a farce the entire Russian collusion narrative has become, as, after digging through advertising data for the better part of a full year, Facebook reported that they found a staggering $50,000 worth of advertising buys that may have been purchased by Russian-linked accounts to run potentially politically related ads. Not surprisingly, after being attacked by the mainstream media and even Hillary for assisting the Russians, Zuckerberg is once again in the press today, fanning the flames of the Russian collusion narrative by saying that Facebook will release to Congress the details of the 3,000 ads that may have been purchased by Russian-linked accounts. And while it seems obvious, please allow us to once again demonstrate why this entire process is so utterly bizarre. The chart below, got it on the phone there, you can see there's a blue bar, the red bar doesn't even exist. The chart below demonstrates how the $50,000 worth of ad buys that may have been purchased by Russian-linked accounts to run potentially political related ads compares to the $26.8 billion in advertising revenue that Facebook generated in the U.S. over the same time period between the third quarter of 2015 and the second quarter of 2017. If $50,000 can swing an entire presidential election, can you imagine what $26.8 billion can do? So there we go. Facebook chiming in with the whole Russian thing. They're trying to create a case that the Russians meddled in the election. They had $50,000 worth of advertisements bought on Facebook that may have been bought by Russians who were politically motivated at a time when Facebook sold $26.8 billion worth of advertising. $50,000 is nothing. A lot of Americans make that much money in a year, right? And on a similar debate, or on a similar tack here, Facebook blatantly, I live stream on Facebook because we don't have a better option. I don't know where else I can get an audience of 96 people. It's great. Thank you all for tuning in. But at the same time, we know that Facebook censors dissenting voices. I promise you, Wake Up News will never have a video or anything that goes fully viral and gets millions of views because it just isn't allowed to happen. But, so this covert censorship is real. We see it on YouTube. Might have had an example of it with my own personal Patreon account yesterday where someone tried to donate and Patreon wouldn't let them. Dissenting voices are suppressed. It's just a fact of the matter. And we see more confirmation of that from the World Socialist website. Okay, it's a very left-leaning, I don't identify completely with socialism, but it's a very far-left website, right? And Google intensifies censorship of left-wing websites. This is coming from the World Socialist website. Google has intensified its censorship of left-wing, progressive, and anti-war websites, cutting the search traffic of 13 leading news outlets by 55% since April 2017. On August 2nd, the World Socialist website reported that changes to Google's search algorithm had led the search traffic to these sites to drop by 45%, according to figures by the search analysis service SEMrush. In the ensuing 6 weeks, the search traffic of every one of these sites, so 13 websites that are anti-war, extreme left-wing, or progressive, the search traffic for every one of these sites, without exception, has plunged further, leading the total search traffic for the sites to fall by an additional 9 percentage points. The World Socialist website, whose search traffic has fallen by 67% between April and July, has now experienced a total drop in search engine-driven traffic of 74%. So there we see a well-established website that's been around for years. They can see how they rank in Google rankings, and now they're getting 74% less traffic from Google News searches, or from Google searches in general, than they were getting in April. Okay, that's huge. That's huge. And that's what we're seeing. Kate Catanella chiming in, try vid.me. Vid.me goes to personal emails. Cool, I'll check that out. Of course, then we'd have to build a pretty large email database here at Wake Up News. That's it. We're at the 36th minute. I don't have too much else to report. I'm curious to see your comments on everything. We covered the NFL take a knee thing. My opinion is it's just a divisive distraction, like the majority of the things that come out of the dotard Trump's mouth. North Korea and Venezuela. Oh, here's some news we didn't cover yet. North Korea and Venezuela have been added to the U.S. travel ban. It was originally the anti-Muslim travel ban, but I think they dropped Sudan from the list and picked up North Korea and Venezuela. But more importantly, it's rarely mentioned in the mainstream, but this travel ban also affects refugees. It severely limits the number of refugees that can come into the United States. And the mainstream media doesn't report that, or they just mention it briefly in passing towards the bottom of their coverage on this topic. Right now, according to the, I think it's Human Rights Watch. I checked out the exact statistic on NPR today. 65.6 million refugees globally right now. 65.6 million. There haven't been that many refugees since World War II. Of course, there are refugees from the conflicts in Syria, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in Libya, and in places like Southeast Asia where they've had unprecedented flooding. Probably some refugees coming out of the islands of Dominica and Puerto Rico right now due to the weather war. So, sad to see, but the travel ban now extended to North Korea and Venezuela in addition to all those refugees. And that's it. But the good news today, a plastic-eating fungus was found in a trash dump outside Islamabad, Pakistan. Jerry Wallace chiming in, the QB for the Chiefs, sure had something to say to Trump. He was pissed. I'll have to check that one out. It is cool to see the sports heroes standing up for something. But at the same time, if we're gonna, it's great to see people standing up against police brutality, against systemic racism. But at the same time, we're living in the midst of a global depopulation agenda, right? Like, if we could get all the NFL players to protest the fact that we're all slowly being poisoned with bad food, bad water, bad air, electromagnetic frequencies that affect human health and well-being, that would be something to see, wouldn't it? So yeah, let's keep on it. Let's all stay focused, stay positive. You can't let the news get you down. The news is designed. The mainstream media news is designed to distract us, to depress us, to divide us, and to deter us from taking positive actions. It's designed to make us feel hopeless and overwhelmed, like the world is beyond the possibility for positive change. But there are positive changes happening in the world every day. And each one of us can do something at some level to help other people out and to be the change that we wish to see in the world. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I hope you keep doing what you're doing too. And I'm signing off for now. It's raining out right now. I was going to go for a nice bike ride, but I think I'm going to do a little stretching, meditation, and then start looking at the news again for a big article, hopefully dropping tomorrow. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It's your boy Max Mogren signing off. This is Wake Up Wyoming. Check out wakeupnews.net for the latest from us. This video will post there after the broadcast wraps up, and all those links there. Oh, a big shout out to Rice Farmer in Japan, tireless researcher. I go to him and check out the news. You know, he's got a different perspective on where we're at as a planet than me. To some extent, we agree on a lot of things, and he's a little more doomer oriented than me. I still haven't lost my hope in humanity, or I lost it and I found it again. So big thanks to Rice Farmer for his tireless efforts in researching, providing me with an incredible resource, news sources to look into and try to distill and get the most interesting things to you. So thank you all. Your boy Max signing off. One love. Peace.